Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Parker Technology, and in each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. On the show today is Cindy Campbell. Cindy Campbell is the Senior Training Development Specialist for the International Parking and Mobility Institute, better known as IPMI. With over 40 years of professional experience in law enforcement, parking, and transportation services, she brings comprehensive industry knowledge and professional experience to the IPMI training program. Cindy is also a past chairman of the board of directors for IPMI. Thank you for that. Prior to joining the staff at IPMI, Cindy served as Associate Director of University Police for California Polytechnic State University. She is now dedicated to providing staff training, motivation, and skill enhancement through IPMI's on-site and online training programs. Funny note, in her even briefer bio, she said she's a lifelong parking nerd, which I love. We're going to get into that. Just for my part, in the 9 years that I've been in parking and interacting with Cindy, I find her to be authentic, insightful, and a tremendous leader. I've attended several of her leadership workshops and always left with pages of notes that I still use today, for sure. And finally, I can tell you, Cindy is someone whom I will always hold in a very special place in my heart for, because she's always been Parker's biggest fan, and for that, I appreciate her enthusiasm and support. So, Cindy, welcome to Harder Than It Looks.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm a Parker fan. What you all do is sort of what I do as well, in a different way, and I appreciate that.
For sure. So, to kick things off, what I like to do is I like to hand you the mic, and I like to ask you to go back as far as you want to go and tell us Cindy Campbell's story. And we'll get to hear sort of the bobs and the weaves and the connections and all of that. And it'll bring us right up to where we are today. So the mic is yours. Go back as far as you want. Take as much time as you want. This is your show.
All right. Not going to childhood. Exactly. I'm going to say in high school, I was determined what I wanted to do. I'm old, so this was a long time ago, but I wanted to be a police officer. That was my career goal. And there was the DARE officer, or I don't even think we called it DARE at the time. And I would talk to him, and it kind of solidified my goals of being a municipal police officer. So 19, I got hired on by the city of San Luis Obispo, California, where I still live in the community. I'm a lifelong resident, but I wanted to be a police officer there. So I went to the academy and graduated and started, because I was under the age of 21, they wouldn't put me on by myself full time until I turned 21. So I was a 911 operator when 911 was still being called 911 by a lot of people. You have an 11 key on your phone, so it was the 9-1-1 era. But I did that, and then was a police officer for a couple of years, and I was the only woman there at the time.
I was wondering that.
It was different. A lot of trials and tribulations. It was more about me being thrown into the mix by officers who basically wanted to make sure I could cover their backs.
Yeah.
A lot of proving myself, but I'm 5'10". I'm, a sturdy girl, but I still, my upper body strength and that of a man I have to work at it harder. So I understand having to prove myself, but I only did that for a couple of years, Brian. Then I went on into parking.
Okay.
I didn't mean to. You want me to tell you about that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well,
got to hear that story. Nobody goes to parking on purpose, I don't think. Do they?
I say it all the time. Nobody sits around dreaming of being a parking professional one day.
Yep.
And yet here we are, right? You and me both. But I fell in love young age, and fell in love with a fellow police officer. We decided to get married, and our contract said you can't both work here. So I went off to Cal Poly, California Polytechnic State University. It was right down the street. They were hiring. Nobody in my community was hiring police officers, so I took a job there as a dispatcher because I had qualification. I never went back into policing. I was a dispatcher. We started a family, and then I wanted to get off shift work. And I thought, well, gosh, I've been a police officer, I'm patting myself on the back, thinking all that about myself. Then dispatching, how hard could parking be? What? This is, I get some sunshine, meet some people. Lot harder, very naive thought. And you know this, but you know how that goes.
Harder than it looks.
And harder than it looks. And I was surrounded by it and still didn't see it. So I truly appreciate folks who are frontline in our industry, who have gone into it, stayed into it. It's not for everyone, and no blame. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, but it bit me. So since about the age of, 22, I've been in parking. One way or another.
And were you in the same place the whole time?
34 years at Cal Poly and just 2.5 years with the city of San Luis Obispo.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I never expected to stay. I promised them 3 years.
34 years later?
No, it was a good career. I loved the university setting.
Yeah.
Great people, great colleagues. But then I found out about the larger parking industry a few years in and blew my mind. IPMI, and formerly CPPA, California Public Parking, now it's California Mobility and Parking Association, got involved in that group and then ran for the board at IPMI, or IPI at the time. And no looking back. Been great.
No looking back, indeed. All right. So you're probably someone who has seen a few changes in parking over the years. So pick out some of your favorite changes.
Well,
what were the most helpful, and maybe some that were the least helpful? That might be interesting.
The first one that comes to mind is a 50-50 proposition. This is actually where Mike Simmons came in with T2 when he was with T2. I am old school. I hand wrote parking citations. I'm left-handed. I've got calluses on my middle finger from the pen moving so much. I could write a parking ticket faster than I could type one in. And it cut my production in half. And that frustrated me. So that's the bad 50%. The good 50% is nobody misread a U for a V or a W for 2 Vs or whatever. There were not a lot of handwriting errors there. And we had data. And that was really helpful. But so, technology changed our entire landscape, didn't it? It really did.
And it is very much so now.
Oh, it continues to amaze me. I go to the trade shows and I walk through and see all the new technologies, services. It's funny. The one constant is the people, right?
Yeah.
We cannot do without people. And I will say that there are some agencies out there clearly that are trying to scale back their staffing. But it's really still the people that makes the difference in the service that we provide. But as far as the other big changes, oh my gosh, again, in California, during my time, parking went from criminalized to decriminalized to having a whole process for hearings and hearing examiners. And I got to be a part of the beginning of those processes in California. Like I said, I'm old. But those are the biggest changes that come to mind immediately. There's lots more. Vehicles, equipment, all of it.
So you have any good stories about people trying to get out of parking tickets?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so yes. And I hear them getting to travel around the U.S. and talk to frontline parking professionals in management. I hear stories. Some of them are sad. Some of them are hilarious. I hear them all the time, pretty much every week. When I'm somewhere, there'll be people sharing stories with me. I think one of the most common ones, and anybody listening to this that has ever worked frontline, it's the folks that think they're fooling the parking compliance enforcement staff by taking somebody else's ticket off a windshield. It's not a virtual ticket. They'll put it on their own to, fool the enforcement staff because, we're so gullible that we, of course, thought we've already issued that ticket. It's just that's the one I hear across the nation for sure. And entitlement is a big one.
Oh yeah.
You know who I am.
Oh, do you know? Yeah. Oh boy, especially on a university setting. Oh my.
Oh my gosh. Well, everything from donors to, I'll just say faculty, guests of the university, major donors will, threaten to pull their funding. When I was back at the university, and you'd have people that would say, listen, if you uphold this citation, if you don't take this back right now, I'm never donating another dime. Well, we used to worry a little bit about that. We couldn't necessarily respond to it, but what we started to do was when you had somebody trying to throw their financial
Yep.
weight around, we'd call the university's donations and fundraising office and say, hey, we've got, Mary Smith, Jim Jones, whoever, and say, is this somebody that you want to keep as a donor? They're upset. I explain the situation. They'd look on their records. I remember this one time, this woman told me, she said, well, he gave $10 5 years ago. We're sorry to hear he's getting a citation. I said, got it. Okay. But sometimes there were people that were large enough donors, we could still uphold what the rules and regulations were, but they would intervene and pay it on that person's behalf and then reach out to them and talk to them. And that worked out pretty well. But entitled, man, it's everywhere.
It really is. Power of the data. Just
Yeah.
asking the question. So, Mary Smith, is she important to you? Not really.
That would never said. They were much more tactful. They, I'm sorry to hear that Bill or Mary or whoever got a citation. That was the end of the conversation. I knew what that meant. That was just the one person that told me like what they were reviewing, and I thought, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
great.
I shared this with you before, Brian. As an enforcement officer at the time, and that was what we were called. I'll be really honest, for what I do for a living now, and it's all about customer service and the perception of our service and how we're making an impression. I was horrible. I was horrible at what I did. I had a bad attitude. I'm a very sarcastic, witted person, and I thought somehow that served me well. I thought I could show people if they were nasty to me, you're not getting to me. I would throw sarcasm at them, or if they were nasty to me, I'd be equally nasty to them because I thought if you open the door, I'm stepping through it. And it did not do me any favors, but it took me a long time to figure that out. And this one incident where I'd heard about this happening somewhere else, had a guy, I had his car hooked up to a tow truck. We were towing him for unpaid citations on file, and he had lots of them. Anytime that we would tow a car, we'd have to bring a police officer in to assist from a legal standpoint in California. And so he's yelling and screaming, and he goes up to the police officer, and he kept saying to me, if you knew who I was, you would not be doing this to you. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? He asked the police officer, and the police officer didn't want to get involved. He just had to be present. And remember, he had probably said 5 or 6 times, do you know who I am? And I had this little book that I was filling out the tow paperwork. I said, sir, I have to admit, I do not know who you are. It's clear that we have an issue here. And if you're having trouble remembering who you are, or if you're having issues, I will call some professionals over here to help you. I look over and the police officer was kind of, shaking because he was kind of giggling at it. And I thought I was so clever. Man, did I pay for that. That was not a good day. You don't have enough time for me to tell you all the horrible stories that are true and not improvised and not fluffed up. I was bad. I was really bad.
That shocks me. Although I must say, I've got a question later here about, a job that's harder than a police officer for sure. You've got to be pretty tough to be a police officer, I would imagine. And you probably see a lot of interesting stuff.
Growing up in a fairly small community, San Luis Obispo's population, the city, is under 100,000. I was born and raised there, and I'd never been out on the streets or in businesses at 3 a.m. It was an entirely different feel, faces I'd never seen before, activities I was naive about. It was an eye-opener. It really was. But, you mentioned that as far as policing, and I have to say, Today, I probably would not choose to go into policing if I had it to do all over again. But I admire men and women who take that challenge on, and especially with where we are in our feelings about law enforcement as a nation. It comes and goes.
Yeah.
And I will just say, in many ways, they've got nothing on parking because, at least going back in my time, I went through the police academy. This is going to really date me. In 1979, long
Okay.
time, but not a lot of people really, I mean, you had people that questioned authority, but there was respect still for law enforcement. I don't necessarily see that now. When I got into parking, first as a dispatcher, I was actually dealing with people who got citations, who had gotten their cars impounded or towed or buying permits. And so I saw people at their nastiest in parking at that time, but they didn't have the same respect for somebody dealing with parking that they did at that time in law enforcement. And I think it was bad then when I started in parking. It really showed me how bad it could be. I believe it's worse now.
Really?
I do, and I'm hearing it from our frontline. And I'm sorry to keep referring back to frontline, but yeah, those are my people, okay? And that's who I deal with. I love leadership and I love leadership training, but the frontline, the folks that are dealing with angry, upset customers, some of them legitimately, some of them have their own issues going on, but
Sure.
they are far worse than they ever were before. And I'm sorry to rattle on like this. I thinking
It's
about
good.
this.
It's your show.
Okay, well, thanks. So
We want to hear stories too. So this is
well, I'm going to tell you, I was contacted by a university during the pandemic, and this is getting back to my point. It said, hey, we're having a different issue with our customer service agents. And I'm thinking, oh, they're being abrupt, they're being unkind. No, I had to actively listen because it was an entirely different message. And the message from their management was they're taking too much verbal abuse. They're taking too much from the public before they, cut it off. And that's where I came up with one of our IPMI training sessions called, the working title was Enough is Enough. Like, how do you know when it's time to stop and maybe not push back, but disconnect in a professional way? How do you keep your professionalism while still shutting down people who are overly rude, abrupt, unkind, nasty, abusive?
go ahead and share the pearl.
Well, it's actually, there's a lot of it. But you want to try to redirect people's anger first, give them an opportunity to correct their behavior. You might say something like, hey, I'm hearing that you're very frustrated. I get it. I'd like to suggest that we start this conversation over so that we can have a true conversation, respectful of each other. Can we do that? Or I'd like to think we can do that if you don't want to ask a question. Helping that person to reset. Sometimes people get so wrapped up in their immediate problem that they've become pointed, abusive.
They're flooding. Yeah.
They're flooding. That's exactly it. And so sometimes if we can gently pull them back or help them to recognize that they've gone off the rails without saying, hey, calm down. Because you know how well that works, right?
It doesn't
Or, be reasonable. Oh, okay. Because, of course, they want to hear that you think they're unreasonable or that they don't get it. But there are ways to say that to try to help them reset. I was at a conference, an IPMI conference, and a member, I will not name, from a municipality came up and started screaming at me, angry. And he was really unhappy because there was no room left in one of the presentations that it looked like everybody wanted to get into. And the facility that we were in did not offer large enough meeting rooms. And we had pulled in extra chairs and there was standing room only. And we were at the point now where the fire department would shut us down if we let anybody else in. So I was standing at the door telling people we were going to, I have another session of this. And this one man really took issue with it. And he was not nasty. He was just really upset. Yeah, and why did you people plan it this way? And you should have had more forethought. I'm surprised at you. I finally said, man, I hear you are frustrated, but it's making it really hard for me to really listen to your concerns through all the angry words. Can we can we start over? And he just stopped. And you could see him rework where he was, and he apologized, and we came up with a solution that worked for him, and we had another session of the same thing. But I went to his agency. Gosh, I think I've been about 6 times to train his staff after that. I'd never met this person before. So that's just like
A satisfied customer.
Well, yeah. And to not make them feel stupid about it. We've all been that customer. Ryan, you fly a lot, travel a lot, as do I.
Yeah.
There are some frustrations that we run into. And I don't know this for you, but I can tell you, I certainly haven't always reacted well. Sometimes even good people just need a second chance to reset if they are just frustrated, and we can recognize that. That's a help. So that's redirecting. Then there's the warning. And I'm going to fly through this a little bit. The warning is that, hey, we can't continue this conversation unless we can speak to each other respectfully. Can we do that? Is being a little more direct about it. It's not taking half the responsibility. Is, hey, I'd like to suggest we start over. Even if you've done nothing wrong, that's the softer approach. Now I'm showing you or indicating that you're the problem, but I'm not saying you're the problem. Just trying to bring it up in a nice way. Say, I can't help you unless we can agree to speak to each other respectfully. And then the final one, so there's redirecting, there's warning, and then there's the wrap up. If you can't get to where I need you to get to for me to help you, if you can't actively listen, then we're going to have to do this another time. So that's the exit plan. But there's questions that people can ask themselves that they are the professionals. They are the ones giving the help. You know, are they maybe misunderstanding? Are they not hearing the rule, regulation, policy, and they just aren't getting it? Are they willing to listen? Do they start to listen? Can you tell that they're starting to calm themselves? And are they self-calming? Are they starting to come back to reality or to at least a conversation? If you are answering all of those questions, no, they're not doing any of those things. It's time to start implementing that wrap-up at exiting. So that's for training. We covered it in a few minutes, but that's
well, that will at least be a good teaser for them. And it reminds me that the particular gentleman you just talked about who was really upset, the key words that you said to him is, I can see that you're really frustrated, which has the mechanism of at least allowing the person to feel heard.
Empathetic.
And you're being empathetic. We're going to talk about that in a second for sure. I don't know if you've read the book, Nonviolent Communication, Marshall Rosenberg.
It's an older book.
It's probably been around for a while.
I think I may have read that when I was still at the university.
Yeah. Well, the whole trick is acknowledging what you're seeing. So I can see that you're really frustrated. What I need is I need to be able to have a respectful conversation, right? So you're acknowledging them first, and then you're telling them about your needs. And then you're trying to, it's not, hey, settle down, calm down. What are you doing? You're being disrespectful. I can see that you are really frustrated, and I'm sorry that I'm frustrating you, but I need to go teach this class. I would love to work out some other arrangements, whatever it is, but I'm not a pro. I just read the book and I got lots of pearls out of it. So it was quite good. So anybody listening to this, I highly recommend Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's awesome.
Okay. And I'm actually going to relook that one up. I have a couple of books. Back up here. I wanted to know when I started looking into one of my sessions that I wanted to put together, but what's the root cause? Not only am I, parking nerd, I'm a statistics geek, and I want to know why. Why are people so rude? What causes rudeness? What are, so there's a bunch of them, right? There's a lot of it. What's this incivility about? When I started, I actually brought these books over out of my collection because I wanted to show you. First one is called The Civility Solution. And I thought, this is great. It says, what to do when people are rude. Love this book. There was another one. This is not something that you just sit down and read. It's Return to Civility. And it's like one of those sayings a day. You can see different ones. Like I just picked this one, strive to find common ground. Whenever possible, use people's names when talking with them. Those are two really simple ones, but they're great reminders for teams what we need to remember.
Yeah.
Pearls.
Yep. That's great. All so I have a question. My observation of you is that you are the quintessential parking person. And by that, I mean, you are humble, you're gritty, you clearly are not afraid to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. And so my question is, where did that come from? Where did that grittiness, humility, and willingness to just jump in and help come from?
Some of it just gaining some wisdom as I age. I'd like to think I'd had some humbleness from my upbringing. I will also say I don't think I was very humble when I was in my 20s, 30s, maybe beyond, and earlier than that. I thought I was all that in a bag of chips, Brian. I really did. I was a woman in law enforcement in an industry that didn't have a lot of women. We stood out like, whoa, what? That's a girl. I remember somebody yelling out to me one time, "Hey, chick cop." I thought, chick cop? Okay, all right. But where did it come from? Hard lessons. I really believe I am that person that does not learn from other people's mistakes and then I could avoid them. I had to make my own and it had to hurt. And I knocked myself down, actually, professionally, lots of times. I remember being out doing enforcement one day in a parking lot on campus. I had a reputation. It was not good. I was mean. I will say, and this is not sounding humble, I was very good at what I did. In other words, I was very efficient at writing tickets. I think the most I ever wrote in one day was about 200, and it was a goal, which should never be a goal. You don't say, I'm going to go out and write 200 tickets. Because what's the quality there, right? It's not about quality, it's about quantity. But anyway, I digress. So I'm out in the lot. I had this reputation. I had lots of complaints filed against me for how I dealt with customers, what I said, how I said it versus what I did. It was about me and my personality. But I'm talking to this man in a lot. He's very upset. He was a guest to the university. He'd guest lectured somewhere, and I'd given him the ticket itself wasn't the problem. It was my reaction to his incivility and what I felt was disrespect. And I stood there and I looked around and I made faces and I made sure he saw he was not getting to me. I was disrespecting him in my head and honestly in my face and body language as much as I felt he was disrespecting me. And when I got done with it and he was exasperated and went away, I carried on with my duties and I looked up and across the parking lot against a building was a man looking at me, watching. He's got his arms crossed and he's watching me. And he looks at me and he goes like this. He points at me and does this. Well, I recognize him and he is the senior vice president, second only to the president, which was the top dog on our university campus. And he's calling me over. I went to him because I recognized who he was. And he said, "Are you Campbell?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, Yes, I do. You're Dr. Gonzalez." And that was his real name. He said, "Miss Campbell, I've heard your name far too often, and I should never be hearing your name." And he was an academic vice president. So honestly, there really wouldn't have been an administrative reason for him to hear my name, but he knew it. And he said, "I just watched that whole interaction. I don't like what I saw. I don't like your attitude, and it has no place on this campus. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to be meeting with me. I'm going to contact your vice president, who will contact your supervisor. We're going to be meeting until I am satisfied that you have changed your ways. And if you don't, you are welcome to find alternate employment." So he's basically threatening me. And I remember walking away and make a long story a little shorter. I remember thinking, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand what I'm dealing with every day. He thinks I'm the problem. I'm not the problem. They're the problem. Never personalized it. I didn't recognize my role in making those conversations go so bad. And what I realized, Brian, over the years is there are people probably still out there that look at parking staff, customer service in our industry, and judge people wrongly based on what I did. And that's humbling to recognize it now. I learned a lesson, and there's so much more to that story, where it led me and where I finally woke up and realized I wasn't just contributing to the problem, I was the problem. And so I think it's why I'm so enthusiastic about what I get to do now.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of bad stories about myself in these trainings, and I have people all the time say, you're embellishing, aren't you? And I say, no, I can give you names of people to contact. No, this was who I was. But when you ask about being humble, I think hard knocks and recognizing what a terrible role model and frankly, terrible professional I was for a very long time.
Wow. Talk about authentic. Talk about vulnerable. That is good stuff. Oh, how many times did you have to meet with Dr. Gonzalez?
I think it was 3 times before he found out that I had gone to visit the campus employee assistance program, EAP, what they called it. And it was basically like counseling. But that, honestly, I had no use for those folks. But I was at the point where I either needed to quit, find another job, another line of work. And that's really what I thought I was going to do. Or I had to figure it out. And I never expected to figure it out. And there were things that this counselor had given me to read and to, think about. And when we talked about it, and he then heard that I was doing employee assistance program, is when he said, we'll meet again should we need to. But he never called me to meet with him again. I'm not sure he ever appreciated me, but I think he left the university before I'd really gotten a new reputation. And it took years, Brian. It took years to change that, at least with people who assumed they knew who I was because of who I had been. Fair enough.
Interesting. Okay. So you literally learned to be humble through hard knocks. And now you're attempting to share that with others so that they can learn through your experiences. That's
my goal.
Yeah.
I have a lot of private conversations with people after trainings or during breaks, and people recognizing their role in it. Not everybody's story is mine. Sometimes it's not them. It's just how to deal with those angry, aggressive people that I can help with. But others who have seen themselves, and I tell some very personal stories too. If I have time, I'll tell you one about like what led to that whole employee assistance program. It was in my personal life. I was taking out my irritation on my family, and I didn't recognize it till one day, and that got me. But yeah, hard knocks and preservation of sanity, frankly. It'll make a person humble if they're paying attention.
If you're paying attention, that's the key, right? Like we all know now, as we progress through leadership, that self-awareness is probably the most important skill or trait or thing that you can do is understanding your impact and appreciating. And I'm still learning. I'm old, just like you, and I'm still learning. It's crazy.
Me too.
How hard it is to learn.
Every session I get to participate in or present, I learn something every time, and I'm surprised at that because like I said, I'm old. But if you're open to learning something new, I learned something from people who've been in the industry a year or 3 weeks. I had a guy talk about down in Southern California, he had a gun pulled on him, and that's intimidating. And he told me the process that he went through, and I got to hear somebody else's thought process on, you got to keep it square on the idea that what we do is important, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it's not life and death. It's parking. It's a service, and it's an important one. Our life is more important than issuing that ticket sometimes if we need to get away. And I just, again, he hadn't been there very long. I learned something from him, different perspective.
Yeah. Do you have any working theories on why people are so adamant that they think parking should be free?
Well, I'd kind of liken us to the tax collector or the Department of Motor Vehicles, where you get your registration and license.
I think that's a good one, actually.
We're all kind of necessary evils in some people's minds. I don't think we're evil, but I think because people feel like we're not the destination. We're a conduit to whatever the destination is. And people take it very personally. And my other theory on this is that, think about this, Brian. You drive a car. You're a driver, yes?
Yeah,
You
sure.
selected that car.
Yep.
Hopefully you've got a nice, reliable car, but you probably picked out the color, the interior, if you have any scent in there, what you listen to, the music. Your creature comforts are in that car. And then somebody comes along and slaps this offensive yellow, orange, whatever color insult on the windshield. And it becomes personal. And now somehow, you have insulted them personally or judged them unnecessarily in their mind. And so it becomes a personal thing. And going back to something about this, I was talking about this university that had said, hey, they're taking too much abuse. How do we let them know when enough is enough? That idea or that concept is even more intense now. I don't blame it on the pandemic, but I think it intensified over the pandemic. This is a very generalized statement, but people forgot how to be tolerant, how to be patient or kind, or even actively listen. And you know the difference between active listening and passive listening. But people have gotten much more aggressive since we've all gone back, or that most of us have gone back since the pandemic. But I mean, there was definitely a ramp up prior, but it kind of peaked during that time. And why? Like, why did that happen? Some people lost their jobs. Some people were sent home and they didn't have a good place to work at home, or they were caring for children or elderly also at home at the same time. And somebody told me a story just this last week about somebody taking issue with this customer service agent because she was working from home during the pandemic and the customer heard a dog bark in the background and yelled at the agent about the sound of a dog barking. It had nothing to do with the situation, but people are really not very tolerant.
Yeah.
I don't see it getting better right. I just don't.
Well, okay. So I've got a question along that front, around the people front. So I read that you're an observer of people. I am too. I like to call that being a student of the game. Right. So you're a student of the game. You go into a sales situation. So my career has been sales, but every once in a while, I'm on the other side of the sales experience. And you start to pay attention to things that you like and things that you don't like. And you're like, oh, that person was really effective, or no, that person was really ineffective, or, servers or service people.
Sure.
And so I'm wondering if you've got a story or two about the time when you've used the power of observation to make a positive impact. So to either turn a situation, or you made an observation and that observation was key to some sort of successful outcome. It's a little abstract of a question, but I can tell already we're 40 minutes in. You're pretty light on your feet.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm only because I just shared it, and that's why it's on my mind. But with the gentleman in our industry, who, by the way, has become a personal friend, the one that I, said, can we start over? And can I?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you with you yelling at me like that. I didn't say it like that, as I said, but I think that had I approached that from our gut response or human nature of just saying, hey, why are you yelling at me? Like, what's wrong with you? These are the things that still go through my mind. We are not the thought police, right? We still have thought come to our mind, but I think about that particular situation. I'm no longer at a university. I'm now representing a large trade association. And I didn't feel like angry at him. I was observing kind of that out of the body thing. It's like, wow, this is to me not a natural upset. And it turns out it wasn't. There was a frustration because he really had something he needed from that session and he thought he'd come all this way and wasn't going to get it. But when you can quiet yourself and almost out of body experience and observe, not only actively listen with your ears, but with your eyes. Active listening, if you have the visual, you can become a little more compassionate about things. I think that to me, it was a pretty dramatic moment. And I had people that witnessed it, came up and were trying to come to my defense. They didn't interrupt, but afterwards, that was outrageous and that was wrong. And we can kind of sometimes get our backs up and think, yeah, that was wrong and he was wrong and he's rude or he's mean, or we label people. But really, when you can just step back and figure out, maybe if you're empathetic, and you were talking about that word a little bit ago, when you can help people from a perspective of, I'm not really part of the problem, even though they see me that way, but I kind of want to change their perception. I want to make this a win. When we can do that, we not only sometimes do that for the customer, but we do it for ourselves, and it reduces our stress. And I'm sorry to ramble on with this, but there's a point
No,
here.
it's good.
I think, much like it was in my world back when I had some hard lessons to learn, we are the cause of most of our stress. Our reaction to other people's stress stresses us. We have no control over their stress. We have only control over ours. And that sounds very zen, but it's really self-serving. I learned this to make my life less stressful and make my life better. In turn, hopefully, made other people's life a little easier, and I made other people's experience a little bit better. But that was not the goal first. I know I'm all over the place with this, but
Yeah, no, that's good.
questions. And I just think there's a lot of self-reflection that each of us needs to do, no matter what we do for a living, no matter who we are, what we believe in. Getting back to that self-reflection you were talking about too,
Yes.
it changes everything, in my opinion. But as far as the other stories, I've got a million of them, but like one specifically to address that, other than the one I shared a little bit ago, that's kind of the one I go back to.
Okay. I thought you were going to launch into the next story. That's
Oh, no.
okay. We're gonna, that's good. All right. So, okay, good. Those are good pearls. And that is the point. If we stop, reset the conversation and listen with empathy, we'll get it. And then maybe we can be helpful. Maybe we can't.
Right.
I'm sure, particularly with tickets and things like that, there's financial pressure that we have no idea about and all of that. And in the end, we just have to be empathetic. One of the things that I've learned in 9 years is that it's really expensive to maintain parking equipment and parking garages and meters and all of those things. And so we, as the parking public, don't have any visibility to the costs that it takes. And so we think should be free land, or the garage just goes up and you start printing money. There's no visibility to maintaining the concrete and the snow removal and all of those things. And so, giving somebody a perspective that there is real cost to maintain. And oh, by the way, you got to pay the people, because parking people want to get paid as well so that they can pay their bills also.
You talk about that perception and that reality. What's really interesting, there's a few sessions where I'm talking about our industry. It's like a basics course in our industry. And one of the questions I've asked people is, how much do you think it costs to build a surface parking space? The answer is obviously it depends. How much does it cost to build a space in a raised structure, whether it's, you call it a deck, a structure, a ramp. Regionally, it's interesting. There's so many different names for it.
There are different names.
And it depends. Does it go subterranean? Is it above ground? And now I'm talking about the reality of even that knowledge, that reality in our front line. I've had people guess, well, I don't know, $500 for a space in a structure. Is that too high? No. I mean, it could be up to $50,000 a space, depending on what goes with it, the lighting, the drainage, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But to see the faces of our frontline start to understand and gain perspective, it helps them to better understand the why about what they're doing. Yeah. Why are we encountering these people that are so upset? Why do we do what we do to protect that investment, to maintain that investment, all of those things? You hit the nail on the head, Brian. It's an eye-opener, isn't it?
It really is. It opened my eyes for sure.
Yeah.
All right. One more question before we get to the lightning round here. So we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, I think we'd lose all of our parking podcasters.
Agreed.
So what one piece of advice would you give a young or mid-career parking professional to help them advance their careers?
Two things. Always keep learning.
Yeah.
When you think that you have all the knowledge because you've been doing it for so long, you had a problem. There's a mistake. You will never have all the knowledge. You and I don't have all the knowledge, and we're old dogs in this game, Brian. So first of all, either comprehend that you're always going to be learning. And then the other part of this is recognition that our natural tendency is not to actively listen. We are constantly thinking. Our brains are so busy that we don't stop and really listen to people word for word to what they're saying, because sometimes what we anticipate isn't what we get, isn't what they're trying to communicate. And if you're not listening, if you've decided, I've heard this 100 times, and this is really something I used to say, let me stop you right there. Save us both some time. Stop sign here. Well, that's nice and warm and friendly and open. And the thing was, I really wasn't trying to help them. I was trying to stop them from boring me. They're hearing something so many times. So that piece of advice is actively listen, especially when you're talking about a customer, because you may be right. But what if you're not? What if they're not going where you think they're going? So
I love that, because I, as a salesperson, early in my career, I learned that my guess at where they were headed is not where they were headed. And if I gave them the floor, I learned things that could be really important later.
Yeah. If you can quiet your head long enough to listen,
yeah,
our brains want to give us data and information. Oh, you know this person. You've seen this before. You've dealt with this situation. Stop.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, be a lifelong learner and just stop and listen, for God's sake. Okay, I love that. All right, so let's go into the lightning round. It's not really a lightning round. It's 6 questions that I ask everyone.
Okay.
So first question is there a phrase that Cindy Campbell is known for? If somebody utters that phrase down the line or in another session, that everybody knows that originated at Cindy Campbell's desk.
There's 2.
Okay.
The first one is, if it feels good, don't say it. The things that come to our minds that want to come out of our lips, that's the first one. And the other one is, we in this industry are responsible for chaos prevention. If we didn't do what we do, what would happen all around us? And if you think about it, people want to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, where they want to do it. We are trying to control the chaos, prevent the chaos by keeping things circulating.
So I have to say a special thank you to you, because I think I must have seen one of your training sessions just before I was negotiating a really important contract.
Okay.
And I was really upset with the procurement officer that was working that deal. And I literally wrote, I was looking at my whiteboard to see if it was actually still there. I've since erased it, but I wrote in big block letters, if it feels good, you probably shouldn't say it. So you actually helped me stay calm. So thank you. You didn't know that until now, but
thanks, bro.
That is fantastic.
And I will go into trainings, by the way, and I'll say, anybody been in this training before? And I'll see a couple of people. How long ago? 10 years. Okay. How does this sentence finish? Or the one thing I told you that to remember. And they'll say, well, if it feels good, and I know it, they remember it and they're applying it.
Yeah, fantastic. That is an ear tugger for sure. Well done. Okay, so second question is, what's the hardest thing you've ever done in life? We'll get to parking in a second.
Gosh, probably admitting that I was the problem. And I mean, that goes to a lot of different sources, but admitting that I was the problem. I thought a lot of myself, and it's not that I think I'm horrible now. I thought a lot of myself and didn't recognize my reach in a bad way.
That's great. We get to see the transformation of Cindy Campbell, or at least relive it. All right. So the next question then is, what's the hardest thing about your training job today?
Trying to get the old dogs to recognize their arming tricks. I can usually spot them in a training. They're the ones that go to the back row, that are scrolling on their phones. And I'm always saying to myself when I see those folks, challenge accepted. All right. Yes. I'm going to try and make an impression on you or with you. And if you don't go there, I can't do anything about it, but I'm going to try and make a difference in your quality of life at work.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted.
Okay. All right. So if you could wave your magic wand and fix anything in parking, what would it be?
Public perception. It's not on us, but it is. Like, we have to aid that, but that people would see the big picture that we are chaos prevention. We are trying to help. We're not there for financial gain strictly or for power or ego. what we're trying to help. And that's why our municipalities or universities, airports, event centers, that's why they've hired us.
Yeah. All right. That's another good one. Okay. So when you're not parking cars, what do you do for fun?
Cook.
You cook?
Yes.
Okay. You have a favorite dish?
Oh, chicken meatballs. I like to make chicken meat. I know that sounds silly, but that's my current favorite. I like to cook and give the food away or invite people over. It's my stress relief. I love it. And that and spending time with my family. I have 2 adult sons with kids of their own, and I get to see everybody because they live nearby.
That's great. Congratulations.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really fun. Okay. Last thing, and you can give me a couple of answers if you say family, but what are you most proud of?
Oh, honestly, the accomplishments of family. But I am most proud of, honestly, my ability to be an adult learner at this advanced age and to still be learning. I am proud that I am recognizing that I still have lessons to learn. And I'm also proud of having the confirmation from some folks that I have had in trainings over the last decade. And that's how long now I've been with IPMI. That'll come back to me or email me and say, or come up to me and say, you've made a difference in my life. And who expects somebody to say that? So I don't have an expectation of it, but man, does it feel good when someone feels I've done even a little something to make their world better. Boy, that just makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it?
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, you've made a difference in my life. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
Fantastic. You are definitely a ray of light. You are always positive and uplifting. And I can't believe it's taken us this long to get you on the podcast. It's probably
being kind enough to make this work with my schedule, but I love what I do. And I hope it comes across as genuine, as you've mentioned, but it is genuine internally. I just hope others can see, there's a method to my madness.
For sure. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're probably, that's a good place to wrap. So I just want to say one more time, thank you for your time today and for your tireless work to help our frontline people, parking people, be prepared and be the best that they can be. It is a hard job and you're making it easier, and you're truly a parking treasure. So I appreciate
you, Brian. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here still. Yep.
Your wisdom. So I wish you well, and I hope to see you soon.
Hope to see you soon. Happy New Year. 2025 is going to be awesome. I'm going to make it that way for me. I hope you make it that way for you too.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. And that's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to keep listening, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We'd also appreciate if you left a review and let us know how we did. Thank you again for listening. I'll see you in 2 weeks where you'll meet another expert and we'll give you a different perspective, plus new hope that you're not the only one with a job that's harder than it looks. This is Brian Wolff signing off. Bye for now.